Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Safe Rest Village at the Aloha United Methodist Church neighborhood plan meeting. Next slide. So I'm the facilitator for today. My name is Todd Schwaffman. I work at the Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Community Engagement and Housing Services at Washington County. I provide support to the team to help engage the community on advisory and general policy engagement. And welcome and thank you for giving us your time this morning. Before we get started, I'm going to ask our Spanish interpreter to let folks who may want to participate in the event in Spanish to make an announcement for us. So I'll turn it over to Victor.
Thank you, Ty. Sí, muy buenas tardes. Hay interpretación disponible para esta reunión, como Ty había mencionado. Si usted desea escucharlo en español y está ingresando por medio de una computadora, haga clic en el icono de globo que aparece en la parte inferior de su pantalla. Puede ver un ejemplo aquí en la pantalla donde dice interpretación y de ahí puede seleccionar el idioma de preferencia. Si usted está ingresando por medio de un teléfono inteligente, van a haber 3 puntos con la palabra más y de ahí va a aparecer un menú. De ahí selecciona interpretación de idiomas y selecciona el idioma de preferencia. Si desea inglés, escoja inglés y si desea español, por favor seleccione español. Y así de ese modo puede asegurarse de no perder nada del contenido de hoy. Si tiene alguna pregunta, alguna duda, por favor escríbalo en el chat o levante su mano virtual para que entonces así de esa forma le podamos ayudar. Gracias y bienvenidos. As Ty had mentioned, we have English and Spanish. We have interpretation both English and Spanish. So if you are joining us through a desktop or laptop computer, please click the globe icon that says interpretation located at the bottom of your screen. There's an example on the screen as of right now. Or if you're joining this meeting through a tablet or a phone, there will be 3 dots with the word more at the bottom right of your or upper right hand side of your screen. From there will be a new menu where you can select language interpretation. And from there, you can select your language of preference. So if you want to hear the meeting in English, please select English. Or if you prefer Spanish, select Spanish. And if you have any questions accessing the interpretation channel, please raise your virtual hand or write it in the chat and we'll do our best to help you. Thank you, and back to you, Ty.
All right, thank you, Victor. So just a few more notes so I'll give folks now a chance to select the globe icon and select your language of preference. I just selected English for myself. The meeting, we have just a couple other housekeeping items for participation today. We do want to make sure participation is easy and useful, and we want to make sure this is interactive. So if you do have questions, we are going to be writing a queue for questions in the chat. We do have a short presentation today. We'll take roughly 20-25 minutes to get through our neighborhood plan. But we will be, if you do have questions throughout the meeting, we are going to keep track of folks who have raised their hand, and we will come back to you with your questions, or if you have feedback, we'll also like to come back to you. To ask a question, go ahead and use the raise hand icon down here at the bottom, or you can also submit any questions that you have in the chat. And so we'll keep track of those. If there are quick responses, we'll try to respond to them throughout the meeting. And if we need more discussion time on your question or comment, we'll be addressing that near the end of the presentation during our feedback section of the agenda. Please remember to keep yourself on mute for today's meeting. We will have presenters who will be presenting. So if you could respect them as they're presenting to stay on mute, we'd appreciate that. We also want to note that if you were called on later in the meeting, we will give you the option to unmute yourself once we get to that point in the meeting. A last note, we just want to recognize that there are barriers to engagement for some communities, marginalized people, communities of color, participating in decision-making processes. So we just want to acknowledge that it is unique and invaluable to our process to have you here and participating. So people with lived experience, immigrants, refugees, people of color, and historically marginalized communities. If you do have any barriers to your participation today, please let us know, and we would like to accommodate in any way that we can to support your participation. All right, next slide, please. So I'd like to go over some quick ground rules for the meeting. For today, we would like to use these ground rules to keep us on track. So we hope to use respectful listening and ask that there are no interruptions. If you're complete with your comments or your questions, you can just say, I'm complete. We do not, we'd like to ask for no personalized attacks. We want to encourage everyone to participate. And again, to make comments specific to the neighborhood plan or to the program. That would be preferable. And then we ask folks to be patient. If we missed your hand, for example, or if we haven't gotten back to your question, we do have a somewhat smaller audience today. So we do want to try to get folks, anyone who's commenting or raising your hands, we do want to try to get to your question today. So thank you for your patience with that. We hope that folks are respectful. In some cases, you may disagree with positions or disagree with others' opinions. If you can, just respect people's viewpoints. Last two, just be open-minded while listening. There are going to be different perspectives today. And then also try to stay positive. We could go to the next slide, please. All right, so today's meeting agenda. We are here today to share our first draft of the neighborhood plan. So we are going to be sharing with you the neighborhood plan today, and then following this meeting, will be made available for folks to review the full document. So we'll be reviewing the contents of that. We'll also be talking about the final posted version that will be on the website. And then we encourage folks, if you do have feedback, there will be ways to get feedback for the neighborhood plan at the end of the meeting. We can have that available on our website via survey. All right, next slide, please. I'd like to introduce Jess Larson, our Assistant Director of Homeless Services at this time. Welcome, Jess.
Thank you, Ty. Good afternoon, community. It's good to be here with you again today. Thank you for joining in this virtual conversation, or some of you may be watching it later through a recorded version. We're grateful to have your participation and interest in this important community project. So my name is Jess Larson. I serve as our Assistant Director overseeing our Homeless Services Division. And we're here to talk with you about a coming new temporary pod shelter program in the Aloha neighborhood. And today's conversation is the continuation of some community engagement we've already been doing with you and bringing forth that neighborhood plan that Ty described. But my job is to talk about how we got here and what this neighborhood plan specifically means. So next slide, please. So just by way of a quick history of the process that led us to today, July 17th, the staff had been working with, the staff is continuously working to identify potential shelter locations. And at this point, specifically potential temporary shelter locations. We have many permanent shelter locations already identified and projects under development. So to help fill out our network, our system of shelter capacity, we seek temporary locations. And the staff had been working with the owners of this site, the Aloha Methodist Church, for many months. And in approximately sometime in March, it was determined that the site was indeed viable, achieving the technical needs of a potential location, helping to build out our shelter system by providing shelter in Aloha, something that we don't currently have in Washington County, and also making sure the shelter was consistent with our community guidelines around locating shelters in and around Washington County. So from there, once that site was determined, we began work as staff to both prepare this community engagement process we are in the middle of, and also working with the providers and partners to plan for preparing the site, establishing contracts, and work towards setting a timeline to open the shelter. Now, it's important here that we are clear and communicating that there was not engagement conducted specifically around locating this shelter site, because that is not engagement we do for any of our shelter sites. The engagement we did was in January of 2021, January of 2022, when we conducted a broad series of community conversations around where is it important to create shelter capacity in our community and how we should go about doing that. And those guidelines are available on our website and guide how staff make decisions to locate shelters. There is state law that allows for local jurisdictions to move forward with utilizing land for temporary shelters as long as it meets minimal criteria. This is sometimes called super siting of shelters. So we use that state legislation to move forward with locating this temporary shelter at this location. Then the community engagement work began with first notifying the community with some postcards back in May, and then ultimately convening for a first listening session, May 16th, and followed that a month later with an in-person neighborhood plan workshop, where we received a lot of the feedback that you're going to hear today that has informed the development of this plan. There have also been some additional sessions, both with the church and also Commissioner Fai's office from our county commissioners, hosting other community conversations. So we want to recognize that there are a couple variety of conversations happening, and the staff is convening that timeline that Ty showed in the previous slide as our specific community engagement process. Next slide, please. So what is a neighborhood plan? What are we talking about here today? As I mentioned, this plan was developed through the conversations we've had with you, specifically at that in-person meeting in late June, but other conversations, feedback, public testimony, constituent reports or constituent emails. However, we've received feedback from the community and stakeholders to inform how to create the safest, most responsive, and open and transparent community program we can. The purpose of this plan is to describe our commitment, and when I say our, I specifically mean Open Door in partnership with Washington County, our commitment to ensure that the program is safe, respectful, and a productive addition to the community, the neighborhood. We also recognize that this is a document that will need to get updated as we learn in time. So we'll continue to receive feedback and make changes. In fact, Open Door specifically will receive this feedback and make changes to the neighborhood plan so that we're ensuring the program is working in balance and responsiveness with the local community. Now, the neighborhood plan can't be everything, right? We receive some feedback that we just logistically can't implement, but the meaning behind that feedback has been thoroughly considered by staff, and we hope that you see in the draft plan today how the intent of that feedback has been incorporated into the components of the plan. I'll give you an example. One of the pieces of feedback we heard was that we wanted a 12-foot tall fence all around the entire property. We spoke with our land use and transportation department to understand what were the options to create the highest fence possible. And in fact, there is only an allowance for a 7-foot fence. So we're going to make sure there is a 7-foot fence around the entire neighborhood. But we're also looking and working with Open Door to make sure that that fence is placed thoughtfully so that it creates a natural buffer between the neighborhood and the shelter program, and that it's completely surrounding the property, and other ways in which we can make sure the fence looks good in the neighborhood. So we took the essence of that feedback and we did our best to put it into action within the restrictions that we have to work within, with land use and transportation and other kinds of examples. Okay, so that's what the neighborhood plan is. And now I'm going to pass it, I believe, to my colleague, Jesse. Oh, sorry, not just yet. So my job now is to also remind us all what our general commitments are as Washington County, the Aloha United Methodist Church, who's allowed their property to be used for this temporary shelter, and Open Door, our community-based organization service provider, who will be on site 24/7 providing the shelter program. So we together, these partners, commit to the neighborhood that we will maintain a peaceful and safe and clean neighborhood. We will share open and honest communication. We will help each other address concerns and solve problems as they arrive. We will provide a public service for the benefit of the whole community, that service being the shelter program, but that serves the whole community. We will respect others and their properties, and we will partner to sustain the livability and economic environment of the neighborhood. So these are our general commitments to you. And now I can pass it on to Jesse, who will provide the specifics of the neighborhood plan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessie Adams. I work on the homeless services team at Washington County, and I'm going to present today with Jeremy Taves and John McPherson from Open Door. So I'm going to talk through the concerns we've heard from you all, and then the ideas we've heard from you all, and then John and Jeremy are going to go through the specifics of what that looks like in practice with the neighborhood plan. So can you go to the first slide? Thank you. So the first section we're going to go over are the safety concerns we heard from you all, both on-site and off-site. So the concerns we heard, and this is not a comprehensive list, this is a couple bullet points of the main things we heard from you all, just to kind of be a reminder of the workshop. So the safety concerns we heard were who to contact if there are concerns or issues that come up, are there enough staff on site, the nearby school bus stop, and criminal behaviors. And then ideas we had from you all on how to make the site safe is to require a minimum number of staff on site, to prevent drug and alcohol use, to have no weapons allowed, and to have pets on leashes. I do want to take a minute here and mention, just kind of echo what Jess said, that we were not able to incorporate everything into the neighborhood plan. One of the safety concerns that we heard from you all was about the low barrier shelter and the lack of background checks. And that is something we are going to still have. We're going to have it be a low barrier shelter, which means that as following sheltering best practices, there will not be criminal background checks done, but we are going to partner with community corrections and the justice system, and also ensure in the neighborhood plan all the things that you're going to see John and Jeremy talk through with the code of conduct and the staff on the site 24/7 to ensure those underlying safety concerns are addressed. So with that, can we go to the next slide? And I'm going to tag John and Jeremy to talk through this one.
Hi, my name is John McPherson. I'm going to be the program manager for shelter services for Open Door. To go over some of this with you, we're basically going to make sure that any illegal behaviors that are found out by us about our participants will not be tolerated. There's no drugs or alcohol allowed on site of any kind. We will not be allowing any weapons on site. There's no parking of vehicles of any type, including bicycles, illegally. So on the sides of roads and things like that. No loitering, aggressive panhandling, or camping are going to be tolerated. And any meals that are provided at shelter are going to be staying at the shelter site. Next slide. So we're going to be making sure that our quiet hours are from 10 p.m. till 8 a.m. We're going to make sure that our residents are safe and not making a lot of noise for you all. Pets are going to be on leashes and cleaned up after. We're going to have any participant who violates these codes are going to receive an appropriate consequence for their actions. And any participants suspended from these services are going to be referred to appropriate services to help them out going forward.
So to further promote the safety and security of the site and community, there's going to be a minimum of 2 shelter staff on site 24/7, and that includes overnight. I believe Open Doors schedules 3 or 4 staff per shift, with a 2 just in case, you know, someone calls in sick or something like that. So that's built into their staffing plan to schedule enough staff to be there and ensure that there are 2 always on site. There's also going to be a phone line available 24/7 to address community issues. So if you have a concern or any question you need to ask, you can always call that line and reach the staff. All calls and resolutions will be documented, and that phone number is going to be publicized not only on the county website, it'll be on a church website. We'll mail out a postcard to the surrounding community prior to the shelter opening. And then I believe there's also going to be signage outside of the shelter that'll post the number as well. And then to talk through a little bit about what staff will do if when they receive those calls, I'm going to pass it back to John and Jeremy for the next slide.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeremy Taves. I am the Executive Director for Open Door Housing Works, and I will be working very closely with John, who is the Program Manager for our shelter services, and ensuring that we keep a safe operating shelter location here in this community. I think it's also important to address that the safety of our participants, the safety of the staff is just as important as the safety of the neighborhood in which we're operating in. And so to promote that and to ensure that we're doing the best we possibly can is that we will investigate all concerns expressed by neighbors. With our 24-hour line, you can call us at any time to express any concerns or safety that you're seeing in the neighborhood, and staff will log that, and they'll reach out to either a lead staff or our on-site manager or John or myself, depending on the severity of the concern or issues been brought to us, and we will investigate it appropriately based on the circumstances. As part of our shelter program, we have established an outreach team which works with our shelter programs. And so our outreach team will be engaging with neighbors on a fairly regular basis. It might be more frequently in the beginning, but then I think it could taper off as we operate within the shelter location. We do work very closely with the sheriff's office, as well as nearby businesses, because we want to maintain a clear and open dialogue with the community that we operate the shelter programs in. And we've also heard that the safety of children is very important. I think that's important to all of us that are here today. And so one of the concerns that we wanted to address is making sure that we have staff that are going to be within the line of sight of kids being picked up for school. That means during pickup and drop off. And then in some cases, we'll be having staff that are going to be doing outdoor walks along the shelter location on a regular basis, making sure that there's no activities that should be going on within our shelter program outside of the shelter location. And then we also, if there's any major concerns, we will obviously contact the sheriff's office. We work very closely with the mental health crisis response team. And we also, if there's a major emergency, we will be contacting 911 and fire, as well as other emergency responses will be coming out to location. And one of the things that we do as part of our code of conduct is that we do conduct periodic checks of the shelter pods. That is participants that are residing at the Safe Rest Village. We do inspections to ensure that those pods are maintaining a certain level of safety, that they're kept clean, that there's no illegal weapons or drugs that are on property. And that's just something that we do on a very regular basis, and we keep logs of the checks that we do. And next slide.
All right, so we're going to move into the next section here of the plan, which is the the site design. So the concerns we heard from you all, we had a lot of concerns about fencing around the site, that garbage and hygiene services were behind the fence as well. And that there was a buffer between the shelter site and the adjacent properties. And then ideas from you all, that it was as tall as possible fence that was not chain link, and that the parking was inside the shelter fencing as well. So the next slide you all are going to see is the site design. I know this is the first time you all are seeing it. So John and Jeremy are going to talk through it quickly here, but I do want to just let you all know when you have questions, we're doing feedback sessions at the end of this presentation, that we're happy to go back to the slides so you all can ask more questions and look more closely at it. But right now, Jeremy and John are going to go over it initially, and then we can come back to it as needed.
Yes, thank you, Jesse. I think it's important to note this is a draft, and so it's kind of a little bit of a moving target, but as you see is mostly the layout of what the shelter design is going to look like. Some of it was planned out just due to where electrical can be brought in, access to public utilities. And so the red line that you see around the shelter, that is going to be the fence line, and that is going to be the 7-foot fence that is allowable for Washington County code and compliance. We'll have a 7-foot wooden fence all the way around the property. And there is 2 entrances. One entrance is up kind of in the northern side, which allows vehicles to come and exit, and that is a locked gate. So a participant that needs to leave will check in with staff, because we do have a check-in, check-out system to account for everyone that's in shelter and out of shelter. And the bottom left side is the main entrance for participants to come in and out of the facility. There is a large parking area that is contained within the shelter program or shelter site, and that is the northern side of the parking lot. And that is also where garbage will be kept, garbage and recycling. And I think there was a concern that was brought up in that we do have lighting during certain hours, when it gets dark out, but we will be turning on the nighttime lighting at 10 p.m., meaning the overhead lights will go off, and then there'll be a nighttime kind of walkway lights. So it's just enough to provide safety for participants that might be getting up at night to use the restroom. But there won't be any major lights that are going to light up the neighborhood. And we also wanted to have a fairly respectable setback for the shelter site. And so on the east side of the parking lot, which is adjacent to a lot of the neighbors on the east side, there will be at least a minimum of 30 feet. And then on the south side, we have a minimum of 20 to 23 feet. 23, I believe, is a minimum, and it kind of increases as you go over to the west side of the property. And we're just trying to be respectful of any noise that might radiate beyond the shelter. But we do have, like I said, our curfew hours are from 10 p.m. until 8 a.m. And we will make sure that's being maintained and respectful of that. And next slide.
Okay, so this next section is the neighborhood appearance. So the concerns we heard from you all were the appearance of property impacting property values, the encampments forming near the shelter, and then some ideas we heard from you all about the neighborhood appearance and maintaining that is to maintain the area outside the shelter and ensure that there are clear and marked walkways around the shelter site. So I want to take a second here and mention again, echo what Jess said, that we are unable to incorporate everything into the neighborhood plan. So one of the other questions we asked our land use and transportation people was about sidewalks on 198th in particular, and that was not something that was possible to do. There aren't resources at this point to construct additional sidewalks on 198th, but as Jeremy mentioned, there's going to be clearly lit, marked pathways by the shelter, so we'll ensure that there are very clear places to go and not people just kind of wandering about, that there are clear entries and exits and clear walkways. The concern about property values, I'm going to let Jeremy and John again talk through the details about how the appearance of the property will be maintained, but there isn't anything that we can directly address with property values, because property values have a lot of factors that go into them, market factors that we can't control. So what we are going to control for is the appearance of the shelter itself. And again, John and Jeremy are going to talk through how they are going to make sure that it stays clean for the neighborhood.
So one of the things that we're going to be doing for maintaining the condition of the area is we're going to make sure that our staff are doing daily walks around the shelter and surrounding areas to check for garbage and unauthorized campers, sorry. And we're also going to be having our outreach team and our encampment cleanup team helping out as well. If there are any unauthorized campers, our outreach team will be contacted to help them move into another shelter location, potentially even to our access center until we can find a solution for them. And then we're going to be maintaining well-lit, secure shelter site and making sure that all of our grounds are visible so that people can walk in, walk around, and not have any issues during nighttime hours.
All right, so this next section is about communication and ensuring that there is open and clear communication through all partners involved in the shelter and then the community at large. So one thing, the concerns we heard from you all was that there was a lack of communication and there was also some misinformation happening as well. And then ideas from you all about how to ensure those two things don't happen is to have a neighborhood committee, to have updated questions and answers on the website, and that we continue to communicate in person through mail and email as well, so that information is available in lots of different forms. And then again, to talk through how we're going to make that happen in detail is Jeremy and John.
Thank you, Jesse. So one of the things that we want to maintain, as I mentioned earlier, is an ongoing and open communication with neighbors. And anytime you see a concern that you want to bring to our attention, you can always contact us on our 24-hour line, and we will treat that appropriately based on the circumstances of the incident. If you are experiencing any emergencies or imminent threats, we always encourage you and ask you to call 911 first, and that way that they can respond to that incident. Anytime there is an incident, our shelter staff will be documenting all of those concerns and what took place, how it was solved, and that way we can continue to assess the safety and address the plan as we need to appropriately. Shelter supervisors are supposed to notify and will notify our on-site manager as well as program manager and myself of all non-emergency incidents within a 24-hour period, so we can look into those and address those accordingly. And these incidents are reviewed by supervisors and include interviews with all involved persons and community members. Staff contact any involved neighbors within 5 business days to share a full report about the incident and plan for situations if it continues. Obviously, we want to maintain the confidentiality of those involved, but those who are involved will be given a full report of how we address the concern, how we will also come up with like I think it was mentioned earlier, is that a lot of this is still a moving target, and so we will constantly adjust the neighborhood plan to address concerns so that we can alleviate future concerns from happening. We try to see everything before it happens, but in some cases something might slip through, and we will do our best to make sure it doesn't happen again. And next slide. And this is kind of the Open Doors forming a neighborhood committee. So this is something that we are going to be introducing into our shelter program. And this is to maintain clear communication and transparency with neighbors. So we'll be forming a neighborhood committee that will be meeting on a planned regular basis so that we can talk about shelter operations, safety concerns with the neighborhood, things that might be coming up. And so those members that will be part of this committee are neighbors and community members surrounding the shelter, our program supervisors and shelter staff, some county staff, as well as church representatives, since we will be operating on the Aloha United Methodist Church location. And this committee will review ongoing issues and concerns, if any happen. We'll be reviewing the neighborhood plan, and if there needs to be any adjustments made to it. Plan for communications or of changes or updates. As mentioned before, I think I'll go back to the very first one, is the issues and concerns, is that we keep a log book of any concerns that might happen, any issues that might happen. And so at the neighborhood committee, we'll be reviewing some of those concerns and how they were addressed as a whole, and how we can prevent those concerns from happening again. And then the very last one is opportunities to engage with shelter programming. I think it's important to hear feedback, because that feedback can drive the direction in which we operate our shelter location for the safety of the community as a whole.
All right, so this is the last slide of our presentation here, and then we're going to step into the feedback and questions part. So we realize this is a lunchtime meeting and that this is being recorded. So the recording of this meeting and the plan and the PowerPoint are going to be posted to the website. They will be there for a week for you all to give any additional feedback that we aren't able to get to today. In the next few weeks here, construction is going to begin with the shelter opening estimated for October 2023. We'll send out additional communication before that happens as we get closer and can understand, due to construction timelines, a more firm date. And then once the shelter is opened, we will have another community meeting event 3 to 6 months after that to do kind of a more in-depth meeting, like as the neighborhood committee, to look at any issues and concerns, to look at the neighborhood plan, what's working, what do we need to talk through to ensure continued success of the shelter. Next slide, please. So here are opportunities and ways for you to stay in contact with us while these next steps unfold. There's our email for any questions you may have, the website for our Pod Village shelter specific information, and that also has a big Q&A document. I know that there are so many questions in all of these events, and we haven't always been able to answer them all. So there is a really, I believe it is about 40 questions Q&A on the Pod Village shelter site. So please feel free to go and check that out. That has a lot of additional information. And then, yeah, just ability to check out our YouTube channel. That's where things like this recording will live, and there's lots of other information there about our programming as a whole. All right, that is the conclusion of our presentation, and we are going to move into the feedback and questions. Thanks so much for spending your lunch hour with us.
All right, thank you, Jess and Jesse, Jeremy, and John for presenting. At this time, I'd like to go ahead and invite feedback, questions. If you would like to go ahead and start a queue by raising your hands, you can hit on the little reactions button down at the bottom of the screen to activate the raise hand. And at this time, if you would just like to make any comment about our neighborhood plan and our response to community concerns, you can do that at this time. And then also want to invite folks to ask questions as well. So go ahead. I see Linda's hand. And we are trying to unmute you right now. Linda, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, you had mentioned maintaining a peaceful, safe, and clean neighborhood. And the peaceful part, 10 to 8, safe, clean, you touched multiple things. Neighborhood, what's the perimeter? What do you consider neighborhood?
Great question. I would like to,
and that includes other areas. I had like maybe 2, 4 other items that is really the perimeter. For instance, the dog cleaning, you said you would get the pets cleaning. What's the perimeter? The illegal behaviors on site. What's on site? Is it just inside the fence, or is it your sidewalk? What's the perimeter? So what's the perimeter on all of this?
Yeah, I might invite John or Jeremy to speak to Open Doors sort of management of the perimeter, and I guess speak to maybe the kind of extended neighborhood perimeter as well. Thank you. Thank you, Linda, for your question.
I'll address, and then John can jump in if I miss anything. So the perimeter of the shelter location is the slide in which we saw the orange line where it's fenced in. All the operations of the shelter program are contained within there, including we will have a pet relieving area. They make artificial grass that pets generally scent, that is a place that they can go. It'll be located in the northern side of the shelter location where the parking is, and the garbage and waste and recycling will be picked up. So if, as much as possible, we encourage our participants to allow their pets to use that area. But also if they decide they want to go on a walk, they're able to walk their pets, out to the main street and up to TV highway area. We also have posted waste bags for our participants to be able to grab a bag as they leave, and they're supposed to and will clean up after their pets. That is part of our code of conduct. One of the things that we do is we are going to have security cameras around the shelter location that kind of point towards the entrance, so that we can be monitoring the exit and the check-in, check-outs of the shelter facility. As mentioned before, we do hourly walks around the perimeter of the shelter. That'll include usually within a quarter mile of the shelter. That's to include the church and part of the neighborhood. And that's something our staff will be doing on a fairly regular basis. If we identify anyone that is either camping or loitering, they would be talked to. If they're part of our shelter program, then that leads to a little bit more of a higher consequence because it is part of our code of conduct. But there just happens to be someone that is unhoused, that is needing services, then we connect them with our outreach team and our access center program to help facilitate their process of receiving resources.
So the perimeter is, I'm sorry, can I talk?
Yes, you may.
Oh,
yes,
okay. So the perimeter is on site only. So then it should read at the beginning, you need to change that, maintain peaceful, safe, clean perimeter. Because you're not, gonna pick up their cans a block from there. Right? That's why I'm reading it. For me, neighborhood is more larger. It would be the houses and everything else around it. But, there's different neighborhoods and they only extend so far. So you really just mean on site. Maintaining a peaceful, safe, and clean perimeter, on-site perimeter, not neighborhood. Is that it? Hello?
Yeah, I guess the way to look at it is we will be providing cleanup in and around the shelter location within a quarter mile, and that does extend.
Oh, okay, there you go. That's all I needed was the quarter mile answer. So the perimeter is a quarter mile.
Yes, and
Thank you.
Beyond that, Linda, I just want to address is that Open Door does have a community cleanup program. We work with some of our local areas to do cleanup in and around Washington County. And we actually have folks that are with lived experience that are part of that cleanup crew. So we help clean up at encampments, at shelter locations in and around the neighborhoods, as well as some of the bus stops and any areas that we feel that need consistent and monitored and review. A lot of times we don't need to go out there too often because it's not too, the community in itself is generally kept in a clean way. But we do have a crew that will go out and monitor deeper areas if it's brought up that is a concern. And that's part of that continued communication. If you guys call us in and you said that there was an area that needs to be cleaned up, we'll send someone out there to take care of that.
Right, that's all I needed, that clarification. So the perimeter is a quarter mile. So the no illegal behaviors on site as around a quarter mile. Pets cleaned up after about a quarter mile around there. Perfect. I have 3 other questions. Well, I'll let it go and let somebody else go first.
Sure. Thank you, Linda. Really appreciate your question.
And thank you, Linda. And we can come and circle back around to you.
Yeah.
I want to get a few others who have their hands up, opportunity to give feedback or ask questions. So I see Arena.
Yes, hi. So this question was asked in the chat and I just want you guys to address it in this conversation. What is the threshold of incidents we're talking about before there will be a decision that the site needs to be removed?
Great question. Can I bring in maybe some of our Washington County staff to speak to that? What is the threshold for the site potentially being removed?
Thanks, Ty. I can, this is Jess again, and I'll try to answer that question. I think I tried to answer it in the chat a couple of times. So we have, I think, 10 or 12 shelter site locations under operation at all time in Washington County. And they are all operated by a contracted service provider like Open Door. Open Door, our partner here in this location, operates a couple other sites. And whenever there is a challenge of any kind happening with the program, we work immediately to address that concern. And so far, in all of our program operations of all of our shelters, we've never gotten to a critical situation where we had to close the doors of the shelter because we could no longer trust the service provider to provide safe and responsive services, sheltering services to the community. If such an incident were to arise that is sort of beyond our imagination, we would work with law enforcement immediately to assess the safety of the program and determine what we needed to do for the participants of the program to ensure their ongoing sheltering and resolve any critical safety issues at the site. But so far, that's something we've never experienced in any of our shelter programs.
Okay, so my question is maybe more specific. Currently in the plan, is there a certain threshold number of incidents or how you guys, safety assessment that will lead to removal of the encampment? Sounds like you don't have that, right?
There are all sorts of contractual obligations and requirements that could lead to us closing, ending the contract with the service provider. And
not the service provider, the camp itself, the village.
Well, it's the contracted responsibility of Open Door to ensure for the provision of the program in the village.
Okay, can you share with us?
Irina, I just want to be thoughtful that we have time for everyone to ask questions.
But you guys didn't answer my question. Can you share with us what would be the circumstances in which the village will be removed? That's my question.
I'll try to answer it in a different way, Irina. We did have a program, a shelter program, where the provider decided to no longer operate the shelter service. So we worked very quickly to find a new shelter provider, a new organization that would come in. Now that was the choosing of the organization's own choosing. Nothing went wrong. They decided it was something they no longer wanted to do. But let's say something did go wrong with that provider. They violated their contract in a very significant way. We would close that contract and we might look to find a different service provider who could come in and provide the services to ensure the safe sheltering of the people in the program and the safety of the neighbors around the program. So if you wanted to provide an example of a kind of incident that you're concerned about, we'd be happy to kind of describe how we would mitigate that situation. But our objective as the county is to ensure both the ongoing sheltering needs of the participants and the ongoing safety needs of the community around. And we will do whatever is necessary to ensure that we can provide that service for the community.
I mean, assault with weapon, I mean, drug usage, I mean, plenty of stuff, right? A fire situation.
Okay, so those are all critical incidents. Let's say a participant engaged in some very, very dangerous behavior that caused harm to another individual. Certainly law enforcement would be involved. Depending on the nature of the incident, the shelter program might close for a couple of days to provide the staff the support and the respite they need to recover. We might bring other staff in from other organizations. Am I?
Hey, Victor, I think you're having some audio issues.
Hi, Victor. I hear Victor, and just so you know, Victor, we are not catching your audio currently. Okay, go ahead, Jess.
So we would take that incident and make sure that law enforcement was involved to address the illegal behavior. Also, our emergency response teams were involved to provide emergent response to any harm that was done. And then we would check in with the provider to understand how the incident happened and what were the programmatic needs to ensure that it wouldn't happen again and that everyone was safe.
Thank you. So those were our two hands that were raised. I want to invite the others in the audience. If you haven't had a chance to hear a response from your question, or if you just have any general feedback from what you heard from the presentation, we'd like to get to that now. And I do see, Linda, your hand is raised, but if you don't mind, I could go to Zach first, and then we're going to come back to Linda and get to your next question. So go ahead, Zach. We will give you permission now. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hey, I was wondering if the utilities are going to be hard installed utilities, meaning underground and non-generator electrical sources.
Great. Jeremy, do you?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Yeah,
that?
every one of the pods, as well as the hygiene pod locations, will be under dedicated power. So there won't be any generators run on site. So you don't have to worry about the any kind of noise pollution. Does that
answer my question? Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks. And let's go to Linda. You can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question or make a comment.
The lighting that you said you'd have for the village would go on at 10 p.m. Is that correct?
That is correct, Linda. Yeah, nighttime lighting will be
Will that change as the seasons change? It does get darker in fall and winter. Will it go on at 8 later, or when by the season? Are you going to change that lighting that goes on?
Great question. So there will be lighting that will turn on at sundown, and that lighting will be the main lighting that lights up a majority of the shelter location. It's at 10 p.m. that it moves to the nighttime lighting, which turns off the overhead and turns on the walkway lighting. So it is possible that
I'm just saying it gets darker in the winter.
Correct. Yeah, it's correct that the lighting, the main lighting that is for the overhead lighting will come on sooner as it gets darker sooner.
Okay.
Thank you, Linda. If I can
okay.
invite
I'll lower my
others.
hand and I'll raise it again.
All right, thank you, Linda. And since we do have a smaller audience, I do want to make sure if you do have more than one question, we try to come back to you. So if we can come back to Linda, but I want to give others a chance to provide their feedback and comments. And I did briefly miss a hand that popped up recently. I think it may have been Barbara, but if you would like to jump in, that's we'd love to have your comment. I see Adam and then AB next, and then we can come back to Linda. So go ahead, Adam.
All right. Thank you. I just wanted to say I've noticed in the chat some talk about the Portland State study. If I'm thinking of the same study, I was involved in one of those villages when I still lived in Portland, the one in St. John's. And I just wanted to reassure my Aloha neighbors. Right now, that street where we put that village in is like one of the most boring streets in the whole entire area up there. I still work in St. John's and I go over there all the time. There's the kinds of things that I understand people are concerned about. Just we don't have like rampant like street camping or any of that. And what we've heard from the service provider is that they're able to help people get stabilized and get them into permanent housing. A lot of times it's just connecting people to the resources they need. If anything, and I put this in the chat too, I think that Aloha and Washington County in general could use even more of these, and I'm encouraged to see that there are a couple more. I live over at the 170th and TV Highway area of Aloha, and we could certainly use something like that over this way too. But anyway, thank you. It's just a comment.
Thank you. And I see AB. Would you like to?
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thanks.
Yeah, so I have a couple of comments. So first, you described the fence, and you described other measures that you will undertake to guarantee the safety of the environment. And that sounds like a lot of work and a lot of resources going into that. And it just doesn't sound like very efficient. It sounds like if that camp were built in a less populated area, then perhaps all these measures, or some of those measures, would be necessary, which of course would lead to smaller budget. And I think it's important that we mindful of the budget, because even if the money comes from federal budget, we still don't want to be wasteful. And the second comment is,
and can I pause you just 1 second? Could you speak a little more to the microphone?
oh, okay. So is this better?
Actually, much better. Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, yeah. So I was talking about the budget and the cost efficiency of this project, because of all the safety measures that were described today. It sounds like lots of resources will be put on there on a constant basis, right? And the project will last for 2 years. And for 2 years, there will be patrols, if I understand correctly, and you will watch the situation carefully and all the monitoring. And I was saying that I believe if you picked a different site, the cost efficiency would be different. It would be better if you picked a less populated site. Yeah, the second comment is that we have here within 1 mile radius, even lesser from the site that you proposed, Aloha that was converted, that was purchased by Washington County and converted as give me the right word for that. It's converted into permanent homeless housing, in my understanding. So is that okay to concentrate such sites like permanent or semi-permanent for 2 years sites in one small area? Wouldn't that be more fair to spread these camps or sites more evenly throughout Aloha, Beaverton, and Pillsbury?
Thank you for your comments. I know that you did have a question specifically about the locating and concentration of the site. And I know that we have spoken to that in our other community meetings in which we provided.
No, excuse me, we haven't. This is the first time I'm asking this. This is the first time I'm participating in a meeting like that. So that was probably a different person. But for me,
and I don't mean to interrupt. I just wanted to finish my sentence and say that we do have a map that we'd like to share. So I wanted to ask, see if one of my colleagues may be able to pull that map up so we can show that, and also maybe respond to the specific question that was asked. So yeah, I didn't mean to say that we already addressed it and we're not going to address it. We'd love to address that today in today's meeting. So thank you for your question and comment.
Anything about the budgeting, about the cost efficiency?
I can jump in really quick about that and then tag in Jess if I miss anything. But I think the short answer to your question is that yes, sheltering is expensive, and that this kind of safety and community involvement and engagement and communication is something we do at all of our shelter sites, not just the Pod Village sites. But the short answer is yes, sheltering is expensive. It is an important part of any homelessness response plan to have sheltering sited throughout the community, as well as diverse models of shelter like congregate at motel sites, pod village sites to ensure that people have shelter that meets their needs. But again, the end goal of this is always housing, right? So we have the shelter in place and we really want to make sure that people get to that end goal of housing, because sheltering, yes, is expensive, but sheltering is expensive on all models. So we want to strike that right balance between having enough shelter to keep the community safe and healthy while looking at that end goal of housing and making sure that we have shelter sited throughout the community and diverse models of shelter to meet all of the community's needs. So yes, striking that balance between shelter and housing.
And would it also be useful at this time for us to address the second part of your question, just about locations of shelter throughout the county?
Yes, please do if you can, because like I said, it looks to me like a bit unfair that in this area, in this small particular area, we have Aloha Inn that was converted already by the Washington County into homeless site, and now we get another camp here. So I was thinking, if that was more evenly spread through the Beaverton, Hillsborough, Aloha area, I think it would be more, more fair to the residents.
Maybe if I could invite Emily to briefly respond. I know that you do have a shelter site map. Would you be able to share that with this audience?
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I was so deep in responding to messages in the chat that I missed what the question actually was.
The question, I think, was, are we concentrating our specific shelter programs in the Aloha area? Two sites within 1 mile radius, I think was described. That's my understanding of the question.
Yeah.
Yes, correct. Absolutely.
Okay.
It's half a mile distance between the church and Aloha Inn, which is located on 198
Right.
and MTV Highway. It's half a mile, and it feels like you were picked on a specific area to place everything in here, and I feel it's not fair.
Yeah, I hear the concern. I don't think it bears out in just looking at our map and where we currently have shelter locations. This will be our only shelter program in Aloha. I know there's been confusion with Aloha Inn because it did previously operate as a shelter, but today it operates as affordable housing. Everyone who lives there goes through a background check, is required to sign a lease agreement, they pay rent. And they may have been homeless in the past, but today they are housed. So that's a different type of program than a shelter. And this will be our only shelter program operating in Aloha. If anything, we've used pod shelters to fill in holes where we're seeing that there isn't any existing shelter capacity. And that's a hole that this program is currently filling. We also know that in the past, this area has dealt with encampments, and oftentimes the challenge is making sure that we have a program and an alternative to send people to ensure that we see reduced encampments overall. And that's the reason we've been able to see such an impact across the county in reducing encampments and unsheltered homelessness. So the solution really is shelter. And the reality is we have extremely limited options outside of this new shelter program within Aloha specifically. And so it's a good alternative as we wait for our longer term programs to come online.
And thank you so much, and really helpful information. And I know that we didn't share this slide in our earlier presentation, but I know it's useful to also come back to. So thanks for sharing the slide as well. We are near end of time. I know that we've gone over a little bit, but we want to make sure to just keep discussion going, and if feedback's flowing well, we're happy to give a few extra minutes. So I see Linda, your hand's up right now. And if there are, maybe we can add one more question after Linda's question or comment, and then we will be wrapping up. So I see you. Go ahead, Linda.
So you said you'd have cameras as they exit in and out. Is that correct?
Yes, Linda, that is correct.
Okay. Is that sufficient, or why is that? I mean, it's people wear hoodies and it's going to get winter season and they'll be bundled. You won't be able to see nothing but, a jacket.
Yeah, that's a great question. We are using that just in conjunction with our check-in, check-out system. So as people are coming and going, they do check in with the shelter staff to check back into the shelter program, and then as they leave, to check back out.
Oh, good. So there is another checkout system. There's just, for safety, fire, for instance, you'll know how many people are there at any given time. And then you'll know, if there's only 3 people there. And then also, it's something that you could update us as to how many people actually are using the village every day, correct?
That is correct.
Great, good, okay. And just another quick.
Thank you,
the
Linda.
neighborhood committee, how was that chosen? Is that chosen?
Linda, if I could hold off on any more comments, I want to address, if we can, the neighborhood committee, because we haven't chatted about that. So Jeremy, if you want to go ahead and do that, but if I can, Linda, if we could move on to our last question right after we respond to the neighborhood committee question. So thank you. Go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, so a great question about the neighborhood committee is that as we get closer to starting the operation of the shelter facility, will be, I think more information will come out about that, because there's just a lot of stuff that we are still working on in the planning of the shelter. But that, I think we're getting very close to sending out notification of what the neighborhood committee is going to look like, when we'll start forming it, when the communication dates will be. And it's going to most likely be kind of a nomination where you'll have a representation of certain folks that live within the direct vicinity of the shelter location, as well as maybe some neighbors that are living further into the neighborhood, because we want to have an equal distribution and voice for folks that are living in and around the area, as well as obviously our shelter staff will be on that, staff from Washington County, so they can hear what's going on, and then staff from the or members of the church. So it'll be kind of a select group of folks that can clearly communicate the concerns and be able to be more solution focused on how we can make changes to the neighborhood plan, make changes to our code of conduct, make changes to shelter operations for like I said, the safety of everyone that's involved in these programs. So I would say stay tuned if you're very interested in that. I think you can drop your an email into the chat section, and we'll kind of start taking that information so we can send out notification when that comes.
All right, thank you. And I will invite Anka if you would like to go ahead and ask a question. And then afterwards, I'd like to invite Victor, our interpreter, if there are any Spanish language questions you would like to add to wrap us up. Thank you so much. Go ahead, Anka.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of our main concern is the introducing of more drug usage in our community. So, because we all know we have a real problem right now. So I was wondering, is there a reason that we don't do any drug testing for people coming into this program or during the program? And apologies if this question has already been answered, but it would be really important to know that. Thank you.
Great. Can we speak to the code of conduct? Jeremy, go ahead. I see you unmuted.
Yeah, I'll speak to the code of conduct. I think for the first part of that question, thank you, Anka, for that, is that, the shelter programs are low barrier in the case that we don't do drug screening or background checks for folks to enter the shelter program. However, the shelter programs do prohibit drug use on site. Now there might be an incident where someone uses offsite, and as long as they're able to maintain themselves, we want to continue working with them, because in many cases in order for someone to take the step towards, self-sufficiency, long recovery, is that we need to be there to support them. And we do connect them with mental health supports, behavioral supports, as well as getting them into drug and alcohol rehabilitation and peer support. So I think that's kind of the reason why we're low barriers, that they need a place to access these services so that they can get better. And many of them that are in our shelter programs are looking for that step to move in that direction. And we allow them, and everyone's plan is going to be different. Some are very quick to move forward, and some might be a little bit slower, but we will ensure that there's no drug usage, there's no alcohol or drugs allowed on property. And we're also going to do our best to maintain the safety around the shelter and around that perimeter that we had talked about, that quarter mile. And a lot of times when I'm kind of running on a tangent, but I'll end with this, is that when people do come back and like visibly intoxicated, or we know that they might have been using, in some cases it's just a small tell, that's when we work with them and we have conversations. And then when they make the decision that they want to go into rehab, we act immediately and we get them there. So it really is a good program. Thank you, Anka.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the questions. I do want to check with Victor if there are any questions in your chat room. And then Vara, if you're able to put up our Stay Engaged slide, slide 23, to wrap us up, and Jesse, we'll have you queued up next. But Victor, any questions in your chat? Okay, thank you. All right, Jesse, would you like to close us out for the evening?
Yeah, sure. Again, wanted to thank everybody for their time and hanging out past time as well. So here, I think we'll have, yep. All right, so the homeless services at WashingtonCounty.Oregon.gov, please send your questions there. Also, I encourage you to give us an email address. That's helpful too, for us to be able to continue to communicate with you, because the next steps are going to be that the draft neighborhood plan will be on the site, the website, for a week to gather some additional feedback. And we will also be working on answering the questions in the chat that we didn't get to as well today. And then we will continue to communicate with you all through email, the website, and mail as well, about updates as the construction continues and the opening date approaches. We'll continue to communicate about the opening date and the neighborhood committee as well. So please make sure we have your contact information if you're interested in receiving those. And please check out the full plan on the site and provide your feedback before next Monday. And I think that is all for today. We'll post this recording as well. Thanks so much, everybody.